all they care about is Britain being better. And they actually love Nigel Farage. In fact, in Tommy Robinson's event, I believe it was in summer, I believe it was in July, so many people said who voted for reform. The roaring of the crowd, the way the crowd said yes, like they really love Nigel Farage, but Nigel Farage has kind of been giving them the back. And a lot of people are thinking maybe he doesn't want to be associated with this because politically it doesn't look well for him. And I think that's what I mean when I say he's backtracking.
Is it possible to argue now that the momentum in British politics is only heading in one direction? Within weeks of this socialist hellscape under two-tier care and Kemi Badenoch's uninspiring start, and that's an understatement in my view, in charge of the Tories, I promise you, Reform UK will be topping every national poll. It's not an exaggeration when Nigel Farage's party say they have all the momentum. They're ahead of the governing Labour Party in one major poll this week and beating the Conservatives, the most successful party in the world, history ever, in another poll. But it's the real votes that matter most, and Reform are triumphing there too. As Superwoman Suala's hubby, Rael Brafferman, now a devoted Reform UK member after his shock defection from his wife's party, pointed out, Reform UK snags their first seat in St Helens with a stunning 41.1% in Blackbrook. They've sent Labour tumbling to 34.7%. The political roller coaster just got a new loop. Meanwhile, it's Reform that seems to be now spiritually leading the opposition in a whole load of ways. Look at the farmers' protests this week, the tractors convoy. Farage was there on the ground, so were his MPs. But Kemi Badenoch didn't mention a word of it during PMQs. Farage and Richard Thieves have led the way, along with Rupert Lowe actually, on the despicable Southport massacre cover-up, of which so much has still not been made public. And with Labour set to plunge us into recession after Rachel Thieves' tax-raising promises broken budget, with the economy shrinking again in October. That's the terrible news we've received today. Again, it's Reform leading the way, with its chairman, Zia Youssef, describing the Chancellor with the fake CV as sounding, quote, like all Labour ministers, a chatbot with a virus. And you know what? We need some humour in these very dark times for our United Kingdom. If you don't believe that description from Zia Youssef, just watch Robotic Reeves in action today.
Nigel, what's going on? Like, you really had my support.
And if you don't believe him, just watch Robotic Reeves in action today.
The numbers on GDP are disappointing, but it's not possible to turn around more than a decade of poor economic growth and stagnant living standards in just a few months. But you'll see from the plans we've been announcing, whether that is the energy reforms we've published today, the reforms to build 1.5 million homes that we published yesterday, the pensions reforms, the creation of a national wealth fund, this government are getting on with the job in improving economic growth and driving up living standards.
People watching this then, when can we expect to get back to growth?
Well, growth is the number one mission of this government. Economic growth that results in families feeling better off with more money in their pockets. And we're driving that economic growth. And we hope that those numbers will start to improve because of the policies that we're pursuing in the months ahead.
Oh, goodness, it's all to play for, isn't it? It's all to play for Reform UK in particular. But there are challenges. And part of that challenge is keeping its base happy. A base, by the way, that remains furious at being described as that lot. Here's political YouTuber, former, maybe current Reform UK supporter based and bougie.
Nigel, what's going on? Like, you really had my support. You really had me on TikTok looking like a crazy woman saying, everybody vote for reform, vote for reform, vote for reform. But lately, Nigel has just been moving mad. Like, I really like Nigel Farage, but I feel like a lot of people, especially like conservative people, were really confused to where he stands. Like, I feel like lately he's been backtracking a lot on a lot of the things he said during his election period. The first thing that he done was calling the far right thugs. That took me by surprise. The second thing was when that guy from he referred to them as them lots. I think that was so condescending, and it basically screamed, we don't want anything to do with that. The far right thugs that they were referring to, these are their voters. And
With such amazing momentum, it's my view that Reform UK and Farage should also have the confidence to encourage a broad range of supporters, a broad coalition, if you like. Despondent Tories, yes, but patriotic Uniting the Kingdom supporters, who probably like Tommy Robinson too, yes. Because saving the UK is the most important thing here. And I don't believe that splintering your base is the best start. But now, my superstar panel. And it's lovely to welcome today the aforementioned YouTube sensation, Based and Bougie, and social media star, Daily Express columnist, Sophie Corcoran. Great to have you both on Outspoken for the first time. So, Sophie, let me kick off with you because your political journey on this one is really interesting. You stayed loyal to the Conservative Party at the last election, even though, Sophie, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'd probably say politically you're a bit more in tune with where Nigel Farage is at. You then supported Kemi Badenoch, but now, based on what you're writing and based on what you're posting, you're looking at this and just thinking, goodness me, it's not going to work. I might need to go over to Reform and become the latest defection.
Yeah, so, I've been a member of this Conservative Party since I was 15 years old. And obviously, I'm not that old, so it's been a significant part of my life. So for me to just abandon the Conservative Party would always be a difficult decision. And I'll be honest with you, I have actually been laying awake at night, not being able to sleep, because I'm not sure if my political home is going to be with the Conservative Party for much longer. The one thing that's really attracted me to Reform at the moment is their ability to try and, for the first time, really connect with young people. For a lot of my political journey, I've always been on my own in the political spectrum, but I've carried on fighting because I knew that the change was coming, that eventually young people would start to become, more to the right. And as for my generation, we haven't really lived under a Labour government. This is really our first time experiencing it. So more young people at the next election are going to be more open to not voting Labour because they've finally experienced actually that the grass is certainly not greener on the other side. However, I don't think the Conservatives are making much of an effort to provide a home for young people, whereas Reform are. And for the first time, we have a political party where young people are at the forefront of the discussion, but using right-wing policies to actually get to the end point of what we want to be. And for me, I haven't really experienced that yet in my lifetime. It's always been accepted that the Conservative Party isn't going to try with young people. But now it's changed because we've finally lived under a Labour government and young people are massively flocking to Reform. And for someone who's fought that battle alone for a considerable amount of time, perhaps the opportunity to be amongst young people who share my views and to really, try and push for what we've seen in France and in Germany and in the USA has become really lucrative, I think.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And I like loyalty too. And I do understand it's very difficult when you've been loyal to a movement and you want that movement to turn around and start doing things right. But Based and Bougie, you're in a very different place on this. You were a supporter of Reform UK before the election, but you have been concerned about what you might, I guess, describe as attack to the centre, that attack on Tommy Robinson supporters. There's also Nigel suggesting that maybe mass deportation's not completely practical, not completely embracing the fact that there's a big concern about demographic change in the UK, a big concern about extreme Islam. Is that what is concerning you most? But first, you know how often I talk about the need for free speech to be protected? Well, I've been increasingly thinking of the need for personal protection from snoopers, bad actors, and hackers online. And I'm delighted to tell you I have now found the fail-safe solution. But what's more, this VPN or virtual private network is also a life changer when it comes to providing you entertainment and information from anywhere in the world. So let me introduce you to Surfshark. I love it. It's such a good service, totally easy to use. And what it does is encrypt all your internet traffic, translation, keeping your online activity safe so you can shop, stream, browse, bank online in complete privacy. But the benefits of Surfshark go way beyond keeping you safe online. It allows you to access your favorite entertainment and news shows and news channels and international streaming services like Hulu, iPlayer, HBO Max, Peacock, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and Netflix. So within seconds, you can be watching any of those services as if you're in another country, which often gives you access to lots of content which may be geo-blocked. Very helpful as well if you're traveling for work or on holiday, because it means when you're overseas, you can continue watching your sports content or other content actually from home, which is also geo-blocked. It's really a good protection against creeping censorship too. I always use the example actually of France, which, believe it or not, makes it impossible to watch Rumble now. But Surfshark allows you to watch anything, anytime, anywhere. It is true freedom. A VPN is also a big money saver because you can access sales on websites that change their prices depending on where you're accessing them from. There are other benefits of Surfshark too. You can use it on unlimited devices, meaning your entire household can stay safe with just one subscription. There's over 3,200 servers in over 100 countries. This means a world of choice is at your fingertips with 24/7 customer service too. Really helpful actually if this is your first time using a VPN, although I promise you I've signed up quite a long time ago now, gone through the whole process. I love using it, but I also find it incredibly user-friendly. So surfshark.com/outspoken is the address for an extra 4 months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price. Check this out too. If you're not totally happy with the service, after 30 days, you will get all your money back. So let me just repeat that website address now, www.surfshark.com/outspoken for an extra 4 months of Surfshark at an unbeatable price. But now, back to the show.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same place as Sophie in the sense that I was a huge supporter of the Reform Party and a huge supporter of Nigel Farage. But lately, he has been backtracking on a lot of his statements. I mean, he came into the scene very much, I am pro-nationalism, I am pro-Britain, Britain first. And now slowly he's been backtracking on a lot of things he's been saying, for instance, referring to the far right as them lots. That took me as surprise because them lots, they are his voters. They are the people who actually got him into parliament. Them lots are also the people whose daughters have been groomed. Them lots are the people who are veterans who fought for the country for 20 years. So I think that was just a huge disrespect. And no matter how much I like the Reform Party or Nigel Farage, I will always call out nonsense whenever, and that's not a disrespect to Nigel Farage. Not only that, but
Because you would put yourself in that category, is that right? You feel that you were one of those people who they were almost saying, well, we don't want you now.
Yes, because I'm also out in the field as well. Whenever there's, these patriotic events, I am there and I have conversation with these people. And they are honestly the most kindest, most humblest people. All they care about is Britain being better. And they actually love Nigel Farage. In fact, in Tommy Robinson's event, I believe it was in summer, I believe it was in July, so many people said, who voted for reform? The roaring of the crowd, the way the crowd said, yes, like they really love Nigel Farage, but Nigel Farage has kind of been giving them the back. And a lot of people are thinking maybe he doesn't want to be associated with this because politically it doesn't look well for him. And I think that's what I mean when I say he's backtracking. The second way he's been backtracking is when he said that we need to prioritize the Muslim vote. Now, here's the thing when it comes to voting is whoever has the majority influence in voting, has the most influence. So for him to say that we need to prioritize that, for me, again, that was that backtracking in the sense that instead of us prioritizing Muslims again, because I feel like Britain, we are always bending over backwards for everybody. We're bending over backwards for the LGBT community. We're bending over backwards for Black Lives Matter. We're bending over backwards for Ukraine, and now we're bending over backwards again for the Muslim community. Why don't we just promote and push for the Christian community? Because this is a Christian country. I'm not saying I'm against Muslims. I'm not saying I hate Muslims, but I'm just saying that when will a political party come in and actually prioritize the Christian people and our Christian values that built this country? So I just want to make it clear that I still very much like Nigel Farage. I like how he's always on the ground with people. You know, he's
Yes.
always at the farmers event. That shows that he has a care for the country. And I'm not denying that he does care for his country. However, there has been a lot of backtracking. And I feel like the whole point of a democracy is that we as the public should call it out and almost correct him, because I feel like if he continues to do this, he will lose a lot of votes. And you also mentioned how he is growing in votes. But remember, the media never likes to talk about the far right or the movement of the right. So they're not going to talk about our frustrations with Nigel Farage and trying to kind of turn his back on the community. So yeah, I like Nigel Farage. I think he's a very charismatic man. He's a great forecaster. He's somebody, when he says this is going to happen in Britain, 5-10 years later it happens, but he needs to stop this backtracking towards the community who really has the most support for him.
I find that fascinating. Sophie Corcoran, how do you feel about that? Because I guess Nigel Farage would argue, although I don't agree with this, but he would argue, well, I'm dealing with a political reality. I'm dealing with the mainstream media who are out to get us, and I have to work within the system.
Yeah, so I actually kind of think that Reform at the moment, as they currently stand, are going to have to try and build a really sort of broad electoral coalition in order to win. And unfortunately, a lot of that is actually going to come from Labour votes. And I think that's something that's been really, underestimated. Everybody always thinks, well, Reform are taking a lot of Conservative votes, and they are, and they naturally will. However, in order for Reform to progress, they need to start taking a lot of Labour votes, because the areas that Reform are succeeding in are in places like the North. So they have to be careful in order to make sure that they're building this sort of broad electoral coalition. And for me, I agree with what she's saying about Nigel Farage. And it's actually one of the reasons why I was originally against Nigel Farage actually coming into Parliament. And the reason why is not because I don't think he was going to be a good MP, but because I felt like Parliament was going to limit him. And I think, he has been one person who has been, arguably, I actually think probably the most influential political figure that we've had over the last decade or more. And he's done that without ever actually having to step foot in Parliament, because he wasn't restricted by the electoral system. He wasn't restricted by perhaps being forced to build that broad electoral coalition that perhaps is going to force him to abandon some of the views he may have had before. He hasn't had to deal with the media and parliamentary standards and those sort of things. And he was free to be as influential and as successful as he likes. And I think there is a place for people like that. There is a place for Nigel Farage being successful and influential without being inside the political system, because a lot of the people who are backbench MPs actually achieve nothing and are just kind of there to put their pass on the little scanner and say yes or no. So that's always why I was kind of a bit sceptical of Farage becoming an MP, not because I didn't want him to become an MP, but because I felt like he was almost too influential to, and I think it would have held him back in a way.
Can I just chime in on that point a little bit?
Of course.
Yeah. I think that when it comes to Nigel Farage winning the Labour vote, the Muslim vote, I feel like he definitely can do it, but he does not have to do it whilst snaking out, that's what they use in like street terms, his far-right community who has been supporting him. The perfect example of this would be Donald Trump. When Donald Trump first came into the elections, he was very firm on his standards. He said, we are going to build a wall. Till this day, he hasn't apologized about the fact that he wants to build a wall. He hasn't apologized towards his
and also, by the way, Trump, despite so much pushback from the mainstream media, the political establishment, for example, never turned on his January 6th base.
Exactly.
And he's going to pardon it. And it shows that actually, if you hold firm, if you stick to your political principles, eventually everyone will come to you. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.